Well, today we're going to be talking about the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, and more broadly, a philosophical view known as relativism. Relativism is something that is characteristic of Nietzsche, I think, only in his middle period. The works we're going to be discussing are from the middle of his thought, roughly, from Human All Too Human up through the Gay Science, or really the German here is a little bit hard to translate. It's often called the Gay Science or the Joyful Wisdom. The German term is Fröhliche. It's sort of like, it's related to the English word frolicking. So cheerful, playful would maybe be better translations. It's something like the playful science. In any case, it's this period of Nietzsche's thought we're going to be talking about, when I think he is a relativist. Later and earlier, it seems to me his view is somewhat different. But in any event, we're going to be looking at this middle period. And we're going to be looking more broadly this week at you might say, a general kind of contrast, a general problem you face in trying to understand what it is to be a human being. Because there are different ways of thinking about it. There are some sculptures in the middle of a river in Germany that I think typify this sort of problem. What are we ourselves like? What kinds of beings are we? What is it to be a human being? On one conception, it's really a purely physical thing. And indeed, Nietzsche is tempted to say, in the end, all we really need is not philosophy, but biochemistry. We need to understand the physical mechanisms involved in the human brain and in the human body. And if we have that, we have a full account of what it is to be human. But most of us think, look, there's some aspect of being human that is really left out of that. There's some respect in which being a human being goes beyond just being a physical being. At least we think of ourselves as rational beings, beings who are moral agents, capable of making decisions, accepting responsibility for something, or at least whether we accept it or not, having responsibility for things. And in short, being the kinds of beings to which oughts and other kinds of norms apply. What should I do, we ask? Are there rules for what things I must not do? And those are questions that don't seem to make sense when they're applied to the physical world. If I look at this screw, for example, and say, what are the rules for screwdom that it must obey? There's not really any answer to that, right? I mean, we can talk about the physical laws governing it, and we can talk about what makes a good screw, maybe, as the Taoists urged. But if I get down to parts that are not artifacts, if I pick up a rock and say, essentially, what are the norms for rocks? It doesn't make any sense, right? And so there's some aspect of being human that we somehow feel is being left out by a purely physical description. Well, let's begin talking about the thought of Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche's relativism in this middle period goes back to an ancient view. Protagoras is perhaps the first person to advance relativism. He said very famously, man is the measure of all things. And he didn't just mean mankind, all of us collectively. He really meant each individual person is the measure of all things. There are no universally valid truths about the world. There is only truth for you, truth for me. And sometimes relativism seems like a plausible view. Is it too warm in this room? Well, that might vary, right? If I go around and ask you, do you think it's too warm in here? I'm going to say yes, but then again, I'm moving around. You may be sitting there thinking, no, it's not too warm. Indeed, the temperature might be varying at different parts of the room. And so we could say, yeah, for some people it's too warm, for other people maybe it's too cool, for some people it's just right. We could think about the story of the three bears. You know, how does that go? That chair is too hard, that chair is too soft. No, that was just right. All that. Well, anyway, never mind. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I read the story of the three bears. But, well, yeah, soup is too hot, soup is too cold. Ooh, that soup is just right, etc., etc. Well, anyway, the idea is, look, everything is like that. That some things are relative is unquestioned, but are all things relative? That's the bold claim that the relativist makes. So, the relativist says, in a more positive vein, that beliefs are true, but only relative to something. Okay? So we can evaluate things as true or false. It's not that we give up that game altogether. It's just that it's relative to now something. There are different versions of this view. You might think it's relative to a society, or to a culture, or to a historical epoch, or to an interpretive community, Richard Rorty's phrase, or to each individual person, as Protagoras seems to think. So is this something that is too hot, too cold? Maybe that varies with the individual person. But we could say, well, some things seem to vary with cultures. In some cultures, there are certain patterns of reading, and in other cultures, there are different patterns. And so the right way to greet somebody, you might think, that's going to vary from culture to culture. Some places it's, hey, nice to meet you, and shaking hands. Sometimes it's to, kiss them on each cheek. They say, oh! Sometimes it may be to do something else, to shake hands, say mucho gusto. Those are things that can vary with culture. But the question is whether everything varies like this. Well, Nietzsche advances a particular version of this view, which is often called historicism. The idea here is that truth is relative to a historical period. So at certain times, certain things are viewed as true. Now that societies change their beliefs over time, that individual people change their beliefs over time, again, is utterly uncontroversial. The question is not whether people change their beliefs, whether societies do, but instead whether the truth itself changes. And so that's a much bolder claim. Now some things, you might think, do change with historical periods, just as customs might change. On the other hand, words might have different meanings at different periods of time, for example. But does everything change? Can you think of some examples of things that you might think don't change? Don't change with a society, don't change with an individual person, don't change according to a historical period, but are really absolute truths, eternal truths, if you want to think of them that way. Yeah. So what's an example? Ah, okay, the shirt is blue. Yeah, your shirt is an unfortunate example because it's hard to say what color it is exactly. But like my shirt is a pretty, fairly pure blue. And so you could point to things and say, that's blue, okay? Is that something that varies with individual people, with cultures? It makes me a little nervous because of two things. You might have remembered that, I guess it was 2 years ago, there was the big controversy on the web about the dress. Is the dress white and gold or is it blue and black? And, I still don't know, but whatever it was, certain people saw it one way, certain people saw it another way. There are different cultures that have different views of color, so some divide the world just into light and dark, some into roughly light and dark and red, and so on and so forth. And so you might say, gosh, what color this is actually is going to vary. In some cultures, this is just light, and that's all you can say. In ours, we call it light blue specifically, but you might think that's the kind of thing that can vary. Are there other, yeah? A concept of what? Death. Of death. Ooh, okay, death is something you might think doesn't really vary from culture to culture. Now, what people think about death does, but on the other hand, when people die, you might think doesn't vary from culture to culture. Or you might think, if there's a culture where people don't die, I'm going to move there, right? But you might think, yeah, just the fact that people die, that we are mortal, that's not something that seems to vary with historical period or with cultures. Other things that might be candidates for this, yeah?
Mathematics.
Ah, good mathematics. 1 + 1 is 2. It would be sort of strange to say, well, that's true for me. But, imagine the math teacher, the relativist math teacher. Johnny goes up to the board and says, 1 + 1 is 3. And the teacher says, well, that's true for you, Johnny. It's not really true for me. I said, yeah, I know. But I just think, come on. I mean, you put 1 and 1 together. And it happened with our rabbits at home. We put that rabbit together and that rabbit together. And the next morning, there were actually 5 rabbits. Well, I guess not the next morning. I don't think it happened that fast. But anyway, you get the idea. You might say, look, okay, mathematics seems like the kind of thing that's true or false, period, right? Not in our culture or relative to this set of assumptions or in this historical period. Are there other examples of things like that that might be good candidates for really universal, absolute, necessary, I shouldn't say necessary, but eternal truths? Yeah. Oh, Latin as a dead language. Well, you mean if I express a truth in Latin, it becomes eternal?
More along the lines that it's not changing.
Okay, right. Yeah. Languages evolve, but you might say Latin doesn't really evolve. I mean, there it is, right? And there aren't really any native speakers of Latin anymore. So you might think there's a place where what a Latin word means, or the way this has been used in Latin, just doesn't really change. And now, somebody might come along and write a new Latin textbook. I still remember a joke from my second-year Latin workbook. It had sentences in English, and you had to translate them into Latin. And then they would underline one of the English words, and the translation of that was the answer to the question. So I remember one of them. You're not going to find this funny unless you know Latin, but anyway, there you go. When Caesar ordered his soldiers to do something, did they do it? And the underlying word was ordered. And the answer, of course, is you bet. That's a Latin word for ordered. Okay, well, never mind. It was funny at the time. No. But yeah, you might think, look, that's not something that can really change the language, so truths about Latin are really fixed. And in fact, you might think, look, this is generally true about the past, right? Can what happened change later? It looks like we keep adding to the set of historical facts. But on the other hand, if Immanuel Kant lived during a certain era, he lived during that era, right? And it's not like we can say, well, in our culture, he lived in a different time and place. No, he lived there, and that's the end of it. And you might think that with respect to all historical truths. Yeah?
So I just thought of something kind of based on like the past history. What the Mandela effect?
Say that again?
Mandela effect.
What is the Mandela?
So, okay, this is like totally random, a waste of time. But, like everybody thinks it's the Bernstein Bears, but like now it's called the Bernstein Bears. And it's like tons of examples of it. So that's like, for example, the past changing.
Okay, certainly opinions about the past can change, right? And so there's no question about that happening, where somebody is viewed as maybe a great leader at the time, and later people look back and say, oh, that person was a monster, or vice versa, where we look at a set of historical facts and people think of this as, a great triumph, and then later they look back on it as a great injustice. So those kinds of historical perspectives can certainly change. But on the other hand, what happened when, you might think, doesn't change. Now, of course, people can alter things in roughly the way Stalin used to. There are all these photographs that Stalin had changed over time. So they would show 4 people together, and then that person did something unacceptable and was executed. So they would wipe him out of the photograph. So now there were only 3. And then later that guy got into trouble, so now there are only 2. And then that person ended up going to prison, and so only 1. And a lot of these photographs with Stalin and a crowd of people ended up by the early 1950s as photographs of just Stalin all by himself. But the facts about what happened weren't changing, right? Those people were still there in the actual event. It's just that the record has changed. And so certainly historical interpretations, the historical record, lots of things like that can alter, and our opinions about history can alter. Now, if we think about this idea of historical relativism, the claim that everything really varies with historical circumstance, or at least could vary, in such a way that we have to recognize its dependence on a certain historical circumstance. Where does that idea come from? It starts, I think, in Hegel, who advocates a kind of historical relativism in general. Now, in the end, you might argue that Hegel is not really a relativist. There is a progression in history toward a stage of absolute truth. And he, moreover, thinks he can describe the laws of that change. And so he thinks, look, not only will we achieve a certain state where we'll say, aha, we've got the truth, eternally and absolutely, even though we don't have it now. Now we're stuck in the stage of historical relativism. But eventually there really is such a truth that we will approach and in the end grasp. Moreover, I can tell you what the laws are for getting there, he thought. However, if you think about that, you could say, well, here's roughly the way he thinks of this. There's this progression of theories we have about the world, and those things are relative. We keep changing our views of the world, our views about all sorts of things. But on the other hand, the laws that govern the way our thought progresses, the way that history changes, there he thought he could find some absolute laws. And those absolute laws were going to be responsible for the fact that this whole historical progression leads to a state of absolute truth. That in the end, basically Geist's spirit is fully realized, and we've got this state of absolute truth where there's no more relativism. So right now, well, we have to be relativists, except by these laws governing the development of thought. But eventually we'll get to a point where those things stop changing and we'll have some conception of absolute truth. And we've seen some ways in which that's developed. Peirce's idea, for example, that these laws are really given by scientific method, that it's the process of science that actually tells us how things change. So you might think from that point of view, it's really scientific method that remains the unchanging thing. What we actually think about the world, what our basic assumptions are about it and ourselves, those change. But the basic method by which we develop our beliefs about the world, that doesn't change. Nietzsche rejects both of those ideas. He says in the end book, there is nothing like Hegel's absolute dynamic laws of the development of thoughts. There's nothing like an unchanging scientific method that keeps us on the path toward some goal of truth. Instead, he says, what if thought doesn't change in rational, law-governed ways at all? What if thought changes in highly irrational ways? So, think about something you've changed your beliefs on. And then think, well, did I do that rationally in response to evidence or arguments? Or did I do it on the basis of something else? Did I do it on the basis of emotion or fashion? Or because my friends all had that view, this type of thing? And of course, it's hard to tell that about yourself, but you can probably imagine other people who have gone through some change of heart about something, some change of belief. And you can say sometimes, yeah, I think they had reasons for that. There were good rational considerations. But sometimes, that person just fell in with the wrong crowd. Or that person, they went to a meeting of the Flat Earth Society as a joke. And now they're a total flat earther, and so on. And so you could say, yeah, sometimes these things are rational, but not always. In fact, there are lots of great ways in which you might think our beliefs get shaped by things other than argument, other than evidence, other than rational considerations. So what are some of those ways? Some of those basically irrational ways in which our beliefs are shaped that don't have anything to do with evidence or argument or that type of thing. Are there forces acting on us that lead us towards certain beliefs, lead us away from others, on the basis of things that are not really rational? Yeah. Trauma. Ooh, trauma. Okay, good. There could be some things that are traumatic and that change our perspectives on things, but in the end, it's not really rational. I was in a car accident, for example, and after that, I was going to say for a while, my wife would say, no, I'm still like this. Okay, there are certain things that terrify me and certain things I do to try to avoid this. Basically, anybody who approaches on a side street as I'm going along a road, I view as now a horrible threat to my existence. Okay, and I've had initially that I didn't want to drive, and so she would drive, and I would simply be in the passenger seat going, bah! All the time, which she found extremely annoying. But in any case, you might say that was not really a rational consideration. It wasn't really that I thought, I just never thought much about the possibility of car accidents before, but now I've examined the evidence and I realize that anybody who's pulling out on a Great Hills Trail is a great danger to me. It's not really like that, right? It was really an irrational thing, and even when I tried to stop it, I couldn't do it. Or here's another example. I used to play baseball, and I was a pitcher, and then I got hit in the eye with a line drum. I did something very stupid. I threw a fastball down the middle to the league's best hitter. And I was feeling so strong that day. I had struck out 2 people in a row. I had him 0-2, but I just thought, I'm unhittable today. Well, that turned out to be really wrong in more than one sense. He hit a line drive and just hit me right in the eyes. And it totally ruined me for baseball. I wanted to get over it, and I would say, well, there is a ball coming at you. There is nothing to be afraid of. You will catch it, or you will hit it, or you will take the pitch, or whatever. But I couldn't do it, right? There was this momentary freezing up, this momentary looking away. It just ruined me as a hitter and as a fielder. As long as I was throwing the ball, I was fine. It's just it was what happened after that became a problem. And so my patterns changed, my beliefs, my ability to act changed, even though you might say it was purely the trauma. It wasn't any belief. I realized, well, that was really improbable. It's not going to happen again. But nevertheless, I couldn't make myself stop having a certain kind of physical reaction and a certain mental reaction to things. Are there other kinds of irrational things that change our... Yeah?
Correlation does not equal causation.
Oh, good. Correlation doesn't equal causation, but we do often see things correlated and we jump to the causal claim, and sometimes irrationally, right? Hume would say always irrationally. We just see constant conjunction. We never actually observe the causal link. And so Hume would say actually there's something irrational about every single move like that. But there are times, even if you think Hume is wrong, where we do that irrationally. We just see this happen and then that happens, and we start to infer that that always happens. Or that that's always true of that person, or that group of people, or that social situation, or that kind of institution, or whatever it is, and we're wrong about that. The cause was not, in fact, what we think. So that's a case where we jump to a causal conclusion on the basis of something that really isn't fully rational evidence. Other examples? Yeah?
If someone we don't like or someone who has like power over us or to like messing us, if they have one belief system, you might want to respond with that concept.
Okay, good. Whether you like a person or not, is going to determine a lot about whether you believe what they say, right? You find it attractive and want to adopt their beliefs or not. One time I was debating somebody on this campus in front of thousands of people. And maybe I shouldn't admit this on tape, but anyway, I had not met this guy before, but I met him just before it was to take place. And, I was nervous. This was a pretty famous person. And so, I said, hey, nice to meet you. And he said, hey, nice to meet you too. And he had that kind of voice. And I immediately thought, oh, I'm fine. Okay? And it doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter what he said, but he's going to say it in that kind of voice. And basically, it's not going to convince anybody. And so right away, I used to be a high school debater, and often it would be a similar thing, right? Am I going to win this debate or lose the debate? You walk in, and that person's a really smooth speaker and good looking to boot and all that. You think, oh, we're going to lose. But that person's sort of creepy looking and has an odd voice. Then you maybe say, oh, it doesn't matter what they say, right? I'm going to be okay. Now, is that because that's the crucial thing in debate? Well, no, it's supposed to be completely off the table. But those human beings, what they are, you know that's actually going to shape the way things go in terms of what somebody believes, what they take seriously, who they perceive as winning. And so, yeah, often, is this something we want to believe? Somebody's telling us something, we judge the person. And so there's a rational element to this. We're thinking, how credible is that person? But there are all sorts of other irrational elements. How much do I like the person? How nice is their voice? How good looking are they? Are they smiling when they say it? And all of these things that really shouldn't have anything to do, you might think, with the truth value of their claim, but do affect our beliefs. Can you think of any others? Well, I'll just name peer pressure is one. Or what about celebrity endorsements? Somebody who's a movie star or a star athlete says, buy Immanuel Kant's books. It's awesome. Well, yeah, I don't know that Immanuel Kant has any people who endorse him like who are celebrities, but if you had somebody doing that, somebody said, buy this brand of tennis shoe or this, you're thinking, that does have some impact on what people think, even though you might think, look, I doubt that person knows anything about shoes. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. This movie star comes on and says, do this, blah, 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 blah. Why should any of us take that seriously? In any event, here is what Nietzsche is thinking, I think. It's not just that our theories about the world are changing, and changing according to patterns. They change actually in highly irrational ways. And our conceptions, in fact, of how they ought to change, not only how they do, which is largely driven by these irrational features, but also even how they ought to. Our conceptions of scientific method, for example, our conceptions of the development of thought, of history itself, all of those things keep changing too. So Hegel would like us to think there is this set of laws we can describe that talk about how our beliefs change and that give us confidence that they will progress towards some ideal of absolute knowledge. And Peirce, in effect, says the same thing. Yes, things will progress toward an ideal of scientific inquiry where we can just be happy with our beliefs as the truth because we've engaged in all of these self-correcting processes. But Nietzsche says that's not the way things are. Actually, our ideas of science are very different now from what they were before Einstein, what they were in the medieval period, what they were in ancient times. And so our theories about theories keep changing too. And on both levels, things are driven not just by reasons, evidence, argument, but by all sorts of other considerations. So in the end, I'm going to skip this, but here is what he says about all of this. He says, look, in the end, if you really want to understand what somebody thinks, you shouldn't just look at their reasons, at their arguments. Those might be relevant, but you have to look at feelings, you have to look at emotions, and you have to look at something deeper. He says nearly all philosophical problems raise the same form of question as they did 2,000 years ago. How can something develop from its opposite? For example, reason from the unreasonable, feeling from the dead, logic from the illogical, disinterested gaze from covetous wanting, altruism from egoism, truth from error. How is it possible, in other words, that we get ideas of reason, of logic, of beauty, of a concern for other people, and of truth, out of things that really don't contain that at all? He says everything we need, which can be given to us now only at the individual sciences have reached their present height, is a chemistry of the moral, religious, and aesthetic conceptions and sensations. So why do people find certain things beautiful and other things ugly? Walk into a museum. Some things you're going to think, that's beautiful. Other things you're going to look at and say, I don't like that at all. Now, there might be a lot of disagreement. This is a place where all of us can say different people are going to have different judgments. However, forget the individual variation for the moment and just think about what is driving that. Why, in the end, do you find that beautiful? Can you really give an answer? I find it very hard to do that. Or think about music. You might take a piece of music that you really like, and if somebody says, why do you like it? What can you really say? I mean, you could do the sort of Dick Clark thing. Hey, got a good beat, you can dance to it or something. But it's very hard to describe, right? Why you find that piece of music compelling. And so it's something that in the end depends on something going on in us that is really not rational, not something we can even introspect or bring rational considerations to bear on, apart from understanding something about us as physical beings. Well, here's then the view that this all adds up to. Truth and belief and things like that don't really develop rationally, according to any discernible laws at all. They are driven in the end by things about us that are beyond rationality. To a large extent, the development of our thought proceeds irrationally. It's driven by, among other things, the will to power. And as his thinking progresses, that takes on a more and more significant part of the view. So he thinks there really is something beyond just random physical happenings going on here. But in any event, he says, in the end, what if this chemistry would reveal that in these areas too, the highest areas, the things where we talk about beauty, the good, truth, the most glorious colors arise from low, despised materials. Then in the end, all of our art, all of our literature, all of our philosophy really stems from purely biochemical things going on inside of us. And that what drives people to have certain views, make certain works of art, appreciate certain pieces of music, all of that is really just driven by our biochemistry and has nothing to do with reason at all. Well, here is one way of trying to think about this possibility of variations in the truth.
Mike, I had a right talk about you. Must interrupt with no pressure approach.
I can say the right house for the right person.
Listen, it's time I let you in on a little secret, Marge. The right house is the house that's for sale. The right person is anyone.
All I did was tell the truth.
Of course you did, but there's the truth and the truth. Let me show you.
Awfully small.
I'd say it's awfully cozy,
That's dilapidated.
rustic,
That has it on fire.
motivated seller.
That's a view.
Forget about that house, that's the murder house.
Oh, I didn't know. Mrs. Astor was very lucky.
Well, there is a different tone, at least, that the truth can take on. And if we start thinking about things as true and false, we realize there are lots of ways of describing the same sort of event, right? The same type of house. You could describe it as little. You could describe it as cozy. This shirt, you could describe as elegant. You could describe as light blue. You could describe as ugly, right? There are lots of ways in which you could describe the same thing. So, here is the way Nietzsche views this. He says, philosophers automatically think of man as an eterna veritas, an eternal truth, as the constant in the flux, as a safe measure of things to come. Everything the philosophers say about man is no longer fundamental, but tells us something about the men of a very limited period of time. A lack of historical sense is the hereditary error of all philosophers. So Nietzsche is saying lots of philosophers and lots of religious thinkers and lots of novelists, of poets and so on describe us in terms of some human nature, in terms that they think are really eternally true. But he's saying there is no such thing as human nature given once and for all. Human nature changes over time. And so he's claiming that whatever we say about humanity in general, that's something that's going to be true of humanity at best, only for a while, only during a limited period. So he says everything became what it is. There are no eternal facts. There are no absolute truths. What's needed from now on is historical philosophizing. So the claim is all of these things change. Well, earlier we're listing examples of things that don't seem to change, truths of mathematics, truths about the past, truths about the elements of experience and how we're experiencing things. Those are candidates for things that don't alter. So what do we mean? Or what does he mean in saying there are no eternal facts, there are no absolute truths? One way to think about this is to think that he's really saying, look, there's a set of concepts you bring to understanding the world. And those concepts shape the way you perceive the world. So yes, 1 + 1 is 2, given our concepts of 1 and 2 and addition and equality, but those concepts might be things that could change. Now I'm not advocating for his view here, by the way, I'm no relativist, but I think that's supposed to be the idea, that anything we think really depends upon the conceptual scheme we use in order to frame the question and provide that sort of answer and frame that belief, and that's something that is capable of changing. Well, now I've got to admit, the next clip is just gratuitous. This is just because it's about the truth. It has nothing to do with anything except this idea of a virtue of modesty. Before we get to that question.
I have a question about what he means by eternal facts. Does he mean, what about stuff like outside of our powers that are true without us knowing that the truth or knowing not that the truth, like taking this as gravity, like, or gravity works for me.
All right, good. Yes, there's another great example of something that doesn't seem to vary, right? Scientific laws, like the law of gravitation. It would be very strange to say, oh yeah, gravity works for me. You know, every time I drop something, it falls. But it might not work for you. I mean, maybe you're the sort of person, you let it go, it just flies up in the air. Or maybe it just hovers there spookily. I mean, hey, around in our culture, we can write the law of gravitation in something like this way. G is equal to G(m)(1) m(2) over r squared. But gosh, you go to Europe and it's different. It's not like that, right? This is the law of gravitation, period. Now, our ideas about this can change. This is a Newtonian law. Someone who is talking about the general theory of relativity might say, well, there's really no such thing as a force here. It's just a question of the curvature of space, etc. But nevertheless, you might think, whatever it is, that's the way it is, right? What about things in very distant galaxies? Let's say even outside our light cone. You're saying that varies with historical circumstances. That's nonsense, right? Those parts of the universe are what they are, and there's nothing that a human being could ever perceive about them, or conceptualize about them, etc., etc. And so you might think, look, there's obviously some things that are really eternal truths that we're after in science, that we're after in mathematics, and so on. And so all of this is something that, well, let me put it this way. It's a really bold sort of claim he's making. Now, when you turn it to human beings, to societies, to cultures, it has more plausibility. But I agree with you, when you turn it to mathematics or the physical world, it seems like nonsense, right? And even if you say, ooh, but our concepts of gravitation change and blah, blah, blah. Well, yes, they do, but surely gravity doesn't change. Gravity is what it is. And it's from, a pre-Newtonian era to Newton to then Einstein. We change our conception of what gravitation is, but it's not like gravitation changes. It would be very strange to say, oh yeah, gravitation obeyed those laws in the 17th century. But now in the 20th century, gravitation became this different thing. No, it didn't. Gravitation didn't change, even if our ideas about it changed. Yeah? Oh, she has the flying elf theory of gravitation, where if I drop my key, elves come and push it to the ground. It's a very creative theory. There they go. But yeah, maybe we could put it this way, actually, to give you some idea of what's motivating Nietzsche and why he doesn't think these things. And for that matter, his talk of the biochemistry of all these sensations and ideas is negating his view. Because he's talking about truths, and I think he thinks of truths as something like propositions. And propositions are framed in terms of concepts, and concepts change with cultures, and they change over time. And so the truth changes over time. Now, he does say there are no eternal facts, and on one way of thinking about facts, that's something in the world that is what it is independently of our way of thinking about it, and so it seems absurd to think that that is changing. But if you don't think of that way, if you think that, no, a truth is something like a proposition, and it changes with our concepts, and a fact is just a true proposition, then this has more plausibility. So anyway, I realize I'm running out of time here. So let me jump a little bit ahead and go to, I go on and on about this, don't I? Let me stop doing that and get to the punchline. Nietzsche's most famous claim is the claim that God is dead. It's introduced this way. After Buddha was dead, his shadow was still shown for centuries in a cave. A tremendous shiver-inducing shadow. God is dead. But given humans as they are, there may be caves for thousands of years in which his shadow is shown. And we still have to defeat his shadow. The most famous passage is this one, called the Madman. Haven't you heard about a madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning, ran into the market and cried incessantly, "I'm looking for God! I'm looking for God!" There were many there who stood together who didn't believe in God, and so he excited much laughter. "Is he lost?" said one. "Did he wander off like a child? Does he keep himself hidden? Is he afraid of us? Did he go to sea, emigrate?" They laughed and yelled in disorder. Nietzsche was the son of a pastor, by the way, and so he's got in mind here a very specific biblical verse of Elijah taunting the priests of Baal with these types of questions. And here's, there's an image of what happened there on Mount Carmel, but I'll skip that in the interest of time. The madman jumped into their midst and pierced them with his gaze. "Where is God?" he cried. "I will tell you. We killed him, you and I. We are all his murderers." God is dead. God remains dead, and we killed him. How can we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? Isn't the size of these too large for us? Don't we have to become gods just to appear worthy of it? Now, what on earth does he mean when he says God is dead? This is a Time magazine cover from, I think, 1966. Took the news a while to get to Time magazine. But anyway, what on earth does he mean? In the classical conception, God is a being who is eternal, all-powerful, all-knowing, right? That God can't die. So what on earth does Nietzsche mean when he says God is dead? Yeah. Good. All right, good. Yeah, if you think about the claim about facts, and the facts themselves containing concepts somehow, you can say, look, what he really means is not that classical God died, but instead that our concept of God is dying, that religion is fading out, that God as a cultural force is dying. So he's talking about the changes in concepts, the changes in cultural perspectives over time, and he's saying religion is on the way. Religion is fading out, he claims. And so in the end, when he says God is dead, but then the madman says, look, I realize I've come before my time. People aren't ready to hear this yet. He's really saying that our conceptual scheme is changing in such a way that God and other religious categories are just slipping out of our conceptual scheme altogether. Well, yes, he claims God is dead. There's a response. In any event, what's the significance of this? It's really, in a sense, claiming that our culture has stopped believing in any kind of absolutes. Not just religion, but absolute truth, absolute goodness, absolute beauty, absolute anything. That everything is up for grabs. So here is the way he discusses it in a passage on the horizon of the infinite. We've left the land and gone to sea. We've burned the bridge behind us. Even more, we've destroyed the land behind us. Now ship, look out, look ahead. Beside you lies the ocean. To be sure, it doesn't always roar. Every now and then it lies there like silk and gold in a fantasy of grace. But hours will come when you recognize that it's infinite, and there's nothing more terrible than infinity. Poor bird that fell free and now pushes against the walls of the cage. Woe if homesickness for the land strikes you, as if there would have been more liberty there. There is no longer any land. In other words, he's saying, really, we've lost our belief in absolutes altogether. So he's not really just saying, look, I'm a relativist. He's saying you're a relativist too. You may not believe it yet. You may not realize it, but the concepts that you've had of absolute truth, absolute goodness, absolute beauty, of God, of anything that stands like that, those are fading away. And very soon people will be unable to even understand the idea of an eternal truth, of an absolute truth. Well, the result of that is really that in the end, our thoughts are nothing more than shadows of our feelings, and that the weights of all things, the value of everything, has to be determined afresh. If we've gotten rid of all these absolutes, if they're losing their power, if people are no longer going to be believing in God or goodness or truth or beauty or any other kind of transcendent standard, then what? What do? We still have to steer the boat somehow, and yet we've no longer got any guidance. we no longer have any way of steering. And so everything has to be determined afresh. And in the end, what value do we really have? What does your conscience say? He says, you are to become the person you are. In other words, if you've not got anything outside you, no God, no conception of goodness or beauty or truth to guide you, in the end, the only guidance you have is within you. And so you have to look to yourself. But this, as Dostoevsky argued in response, is a great danger. Because if you're just to become the person you are, well, why won't you become like Narcissus, who simply stares at himself in the mirror? If you have nothing outside you to guide your life, guide your choices, if it's coming from you, well then, in a sense, gosh, why aren't you just a sort of person who's trapped in a kind of narcissism, living out according to what's already there? Moreover, you might say, what if what's inside you is not so great? Think about Shunzi, who says, actually, we're born kind of evil, and we need lots of effort. Or, for that matter, Confucius or Aristotle. Now, if you think, like Mencius, that, look, we're all naturally good anyway, then maybe getting all of this from inside is not so bad. But if that's not true, and if indeed we no longer have a standard to decide whether it's true, then it looks like we're trapped inside ourselves. Next time, we're going to talk about perspectivism, which is a way of trying to capture some of what's going on in relativism, but retain the notion of absolute truth.